Hey, this is Lola, but you can call me Lola if you like.
Hi, this is Velisa, and you can call me Vels if you like. And this is the Everybody Hates HR pod, episode 5. Um,
Ooh.
yeah, woo, woo, woo. I'm sure you can see that, well, not see, but hear somebody is missing.
Yeah, Foye is not feeling very well this week, so it's just me and Vels for today. I have a theory, of what happened to Foye.
What's your theory?
I feel like she got so buff that she made herself sick because I'm already like she's just been oppressing us on Instagram. I don't know if you guys if you guys follow Foye, like she's the pictures that she's been putting out on Instagram recently, like she's so buff that she's been making me sick. So I
That's
feel like
true.
maybe she just tipped over the edge and she got so buff that she made herself sick.
It's so true because we are not giving the same content. We
I know it's so depressing, but we hope she feels better soon. But like
yeah.
that's my particular theory in it. I think God said, "Foye, take time in it." It's not everybody's neck. So what have you been doing this week?
What have I been doing? I am tired. That's what I've been doing this week. I am tired.
Tired.
I wish I could tell you, but it feels like a whirlwind. And I am going to be a um chief bridesmaid this week. So yeah,
Oh, is it this week? That's come around so quickly. I feel like you was talking about it being like next month or something.
yeah, no, it has. It's come around really quick. So yeah, that's what I'm just prepping for now, really. Yeah. What about you, Lola? What have you been up to?
I'm tired too, but I won't be tired next week. I'm tired because I've been working on a contract and the contract finishes tomorrow actually. And from next week, I'm taking a month off work. So
Oh, it
I'm
must
just
be
trying to get
nice.
everything done. I'll be having to check in because I'm running my business at the moment. So I have to check in on a few things to make sure they're still going. But I decided that I'm going to take a month off work because I calculated that the last time I had a solid month off work was 10 years ago.
Oh
So
wow.
yeah, so basically before I started like well, my sort of first proper job, maybe my second job, I had some time off. And since then, even between jobs, I've never had like a month. I've had 3 weeks, but I feel like it hasn't been like a good solid 3 weeks where I could completely like switch off and stuff like that. So I was like, this
Yeah.
is what I'm gonna do now. I'm gonna take 1 month off. And when I decided to start working for myself, this is the lifestyle I wanted. But actually, since I've started
Mm,
working for myself, I've just been working like a dog. So yeah,
yeah.
that's why I'm so tired because I've been trying to get everything done and everything completed, like wrapped up so that it can kind of look
Mm,
after itself for a little while. And then, yeah, I'm going to be living the softest life. Listen,
mm.
Lisa, my soft life is going to make your soft life look like hardship.
I
That's
cannot
the
wait.
kind of
I hope
soft
we
life
get
that I'm
that
going to be
for
living.
I hope we get that for content then. That's what I'm
You're gonna get the content. I've already booked in to do my hair. I've booked in to do my nails. I've booked in
hmm
to remove all the hair from my body. I
Yeah.
need to get my eyelashes done, but that relies on our good sis Foye being well. So yeah, and I'm potentially gonna book like a trip, but a staycay because whenever I get time off, I try and leave the country. And I thought, nah,
hmm
sometimes UK.
No, that sounds very nice. To be fair, like until being on maternity leave, I'm exactly the same. I've never taken more than like 2 weeks off work, but now I've been off for almost a year, so I
You know
will
what?
be changing.
It's the culture, like
Yeah.
it's the culture that you have a few weeks off and then you start something else. Like when I say it's been 10 years, it will be the same for anyone who's been consistently working since they started. So it's like sometimes between jobs, you're lucky enough to have some time off, or maybe you get put on gardening leave or something like that. But a lot of people just kind of do back-to-back jobs. Maybe between jobs, you take 2 weeks off, get 3 weeks. Some companies have really good things where you can like have a sabbatical or something. And yeah, but a lot of people will just be working non-stop.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Um,
Can
yeah,
I just give a little disclaimer?
go
Guys, we're
on.
recording remotely. This is the first time we've recorded the podcast remotely. So hopefully the sound is okay. The reason I'm telling you is because I live in the hood. So you may hear sirens. You may hear sirens going past, but if you do, like, just forgive me and I'll try to mute myself. But this is what happens when you live in the hood. I mean, I don't live in the hood. I live next to the hood, but I live on the main road.
You're in the gentrified hood. It's calm.
You think I don't live in? You've been to my house. Do I live in the hood?
No, well, you're in what is now like the gentrified side of the hood. Like now, people are like, you know, wanting to be on that road.
I feel like you're really choosing your words carefully, but that's okay. I appreciate. I,
I'm
I
trying not
appreciate you
to
for that. I appreciate you for
expose
that.
where you live.
Listen, where I'm living now, they're selling plantain 3 for £1, and that's how I know that I don't live in the hood. Because if I lived in the hood, they'd be selling it 4 for £1 like everywhere else. My plantain is gentrified.
Oh
What's
gosh.
been in the news this week?
So I'll tell you, well, it's not even the news, it's just current relevant stuff.
Oh, mate.
Abercrombie and Fitch. What's it called? The rise and fall, white hot of Abercrombie and Fitch.
Was it called White Hot?
I'm pretty sure. Am I making that up?
I don't know, but I just remember because you said you watched it and you recommended it, so I watched it. But I just typed in Abercrombie and Fitch. For those who haven't seen it, it's on Netflix. And I mean, Velisa, what's it about? You might be able to give a bit of a better summary.
Sorry, it is called White Hot: The Rise and Fall of Abercrombie and Fitch. And basically, it's just about how Abercrombie and Fitch were a brand that essentially hired only good-looking white people who looked like, you know, your typical American footballer and your cheerleader or your surfer, that sort of look. And everybody they hired looked that way. And their campaigns were like, it was weird because no one in their campaigns were wearing clothes. They were all naked, like these big,
Yeah. And
yeah,
do you know what? When they started showing some of the stuff, like I remember Abercrombie and Fitch, but I never really paid it that much attention, both them and Hollister. The stores were like, I just felt like they were dark and they just had these weird people standing
yeah,
outside. But like, so I never really paid that much attention to the advertising. But I was proper shocked at like how they're selling clothes and no one is wearing the clothes. Like, the people were literally naked.
yeah, yeah. It's really scary that that was happening. And
And then the few black people or ethnic minorities or whatever you want to call non-white people, we'll call them, that they did hire, they just heavily discriminated against them and made them literally work in the back.
literally, and yeah. So basically, it was about their journey of going from that to realizing actually we need more diversity because the times had changed. And it's all about, you know, some cases that they had where they didn't do the right thing by people who were diverse, about them bringing in a DNI VP to come in and change things. And it's so funny because even Lola, when you were just talking, you're speaking like Abercrombie is not around anymore. Like they are still around. Hollister is still around. So it's so interesting because it was really a rise and fall when no one really looked to Abercrombie in the same way that they used to back in the day. So yeah, that's just like a high summary, but just some key parts of it is like the teenager who applied for a job and they didn't give it to her because she was wearing a hijab, and they were so
Oh,
wrong. Do you remember?
yeah.
And they were so wrong and strong that it went to Supreme Court, and they still said nope. It's like wearing a hat. Like she
When
can't.
they said that, I said no. When they said, "Oh no, we don't let people wear hats either," and I thought, yeah,
Ignorant,
you people are lost. You're
so
lost.
ignorant. So ignorant. It was crazy, but it got me thinking because I used to work for a recruitment company, and it was very similar to Abercrombie, where everybody looked the same. Like it was literally like clones, the same sort of suit, the way they gel their hair, the way they looked, like everything was the same. And it's crazy because people naturally hire in their own image, but like that shouldn't be the case, right? It should be diverse.
Yeah, I think the thing with Abercrombie that made it really, I just terrible. It's like when you think about a recruitment business like that, and I've worked in similar businesses, or even in like consulting businesses or any kind of business where you kind of have like the cookie cutter thing. A lot of the time, not that it's any better, but it's like unconscious. So someone comes, two people
Mm,
come in, one looks like you, one doesn't. You gravitate to the one that looks like you, and
mhm,
you come up with the reason why you like that person, which is not they
mhm,
look like me, right? With
mhm.
Abercrombie, in the documentary, the thing I found so bad is that they would literally write it down. Like they would tell people this is what the Abercrombie look is. Girl
Mm.
next door, blonde hair, blue eyes, like, they'll basically like bring the Aryans through. Do you know what I mean? Like it was terrible. They would
Mm.
write down what the look was, what kind of people they liked, even from a body, like height, like all of this stuff they were writing down and shamelessly. Whereas in like other places, like in normal companies that we see,
They
yeah,
wouldn't write it down.
they wouldn't write it down, and maybe there's an affinity bias, but maybe the people they're hiring the people who are doing the hiring themselves, obviously the bias is there, but sometimes they're not even as inherently aware.
Mm.
But here it was literally like, no, this is what we want. And they would scout people to be, imagine being scouted to be a sales assistant based on your looks. Imagine someone be like, oh, I just saw you on the street. Do you want to work at H&M?
Mad. But
Like,
I
it's
remember
crazy.
Abercrombie, like when it was, the club environment on Oxford Street. Like I remember people from like my college and stuff wanting to work there and like realizing actually they all got a certain look. And then some of them did work there. Like one of my good friends actually ended up working at Abercrombie and Fitch, and she's beautiful, but she was in the warehouse.
No, that's wild.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like some of the people in the documentary, they basically came together to basically um do a class action, or some people they basically all come together and sued, and they all had different stories. There was a day when like there was one incident where there was a store that was close to a university where they had like lots of like East Asians, and so there was a lot of people in the store, that a lot of students um who were East Asian, and like one of the people from head office came and basically said, you have too many people that are East Asian here, and you need to go and you need to get rid of them and get more people that look like this. So
Can you
basically get more white people in the store. And they did it. They went around, they fired everybody. Um, and then eventually people started clocking what was happening. A couple of the managers, did a little bit of whistleblowing as well. So they was like,
imagine?
they're tired of, having to cancel people's shifts because the people are, black, or the people are Asian, or the people are Hispanic, or whatever. So that was terrible. And I think the worst part is, even throughout all of this, knowing that they're not the most diverse business, being wrong and strong with it, they at some point had released all these like motif t-shirts. So all of
Yeah.
these t-shirts that had like really, I mean, there's no other way to describe it, but really racist slogans. So about like Mexicans, or about, East Asians, or I don't know if it was specific to Chinese people or whatever. And they released all these t-shirts, and they were supposed to be funny, but they were just really offensive. And
Mm,
apparently they did the thing that businesses love to do, which is basically say, oh yeah, but the people that we had are the Mexicans in our business, they thought it was funny. Okay, cool. But the Mexicans in your business represent everybody, and
mm,
also, are they going to be free to tell you if they think what you're doing is wrong? Do you know
mm,
what I mean? Like, I just don't understand. They were like, oh no, there was Mexicans. It was a Mexican that signed it off. Like, yeah, they just did so many bad things, and now they've just been on this journey to reinvent themselves,
mm.
which they have done fairly successfully, I guess. What
I
did you
mean,
think about the D&I guy?
yeah, as soon as I saw him, I was like, of course he's black. That was my first reaction. Like, of course he's black. Because I feel like every single, like, especially large companies will look at their boards and most people are white men. And then you'll have that one DNI person, he's a black woman or black man. Like,
Yeah.
it's to the point where now if I do see somebody in that role that isn't black, I'm like, oh, okay. Because it just seems like to be the go-to, and it's, I don't know. I mean, I'm
It's
happy to see black people in senior positions, but it's kind of irritating at the same time that it's always
only in that role.
yeah, yeah.
Do you know what? I'm conflicted on this for two reasons. The first one, I guess two opposing things. The first one is, I think having life experience, or having lived the experience of being in a, I guess, minority group, depending on what the D&I role is focused on, is helpful, and it's
Mhm,
important to
mhm.
have that, but also lived experience doesn't qualify you to do a D&I role.
Mhm.
Um, so a lot of like Black people, especially, when you speak to them, they're like, "Oh, I'd love to go into D&I," and I'm like, number one, I could think of nothing worse than doing a D&I role for various reasons.
Mm.
But when you do a D&I role, there's very few D&I roles I've ever seen which are specific to one area of D&I, and if there
Mhm.
is,
Mhm.
then it's women.
Yeah.
Or maybe sometimes you get a social mobility, but if you're a Black person and you're wanting to work in D&I, you have to remember that you're going to have to do D&I initiatives that are related to gender, D&I
Mhm.
initiatives that are related to sexuality, D&I
Mhm.
initiatives which are related to gender identity, D&I initiatives which are related to socioeconomic status, D&I initiatives which are related to ability and neurodiversity, all of these things. And sometimes people think if you go D&I, you get to rally for the Black people, or you get to rally for women, or you get to rally for your own personal cause. And you don't. You need to be just as passionate about all of these things. Like, even
Everything.
if you're
Yeah.
not passionate, you need to be able to do the work.
Mhm.
So, but yeah, so I think it's it's when it's just as hard when you see somebody in a D&I role, and you feel like on the surface you look at that person and you're like, okay, if you have a white man in a D&I role, everybody will have something to say, but he may be just as qualified as a Black woman to do it. um so yeah, I don't know how I personally wouldn't have taken that gig, because they were in such a bad place so publicly, and if you looked around the business, even if you wanted to do well, I doubt I would. I knew that this guy, even though he felt like he had made some change, I kind of felt like, I know that this is not going to be what he wants it to be.
Mm. Mm.
Would you have
Yeah.
taken the job?
For the bag, yes. But
I don't even know what the bag is, but I expect it was a lot of money.
yeah, of course. But in general, no, because it's true. You have to have the same passion for everything. You need to have the same empathy. You need to all of that stuff. You need it. Like I feel like yeah, like you said, it's really easy when it's your own lived experience to focus or be passionate about that side, but it has to be everything, intersectionality as well, which I feel a lot of people, overlook when looking at DNI as well. So yeah, no.
And also having the strategic skills and abilities, like, it's not just, oh, I know what Black people want. No, you don't. I know what women want. No, you don't. Like, you need to be able to do stuff like research. You have to have good stakeholder management. You need to really, understand, be able to problem solve and understand problems and all this other kind of stuff. Um, but yeah,
That's
it's not.
why D&I is a dangerous part of, I mean, they put it under HR, and I feel like it's a dangerous part in terms of anyone can really do D&I based on having a certain background. But you're right, like who's actually qualified to do D&I?
That's what I'm saying.
Because it's such a new like
It
role
is
as
so
well.
new.
Yeah.
It's so new. So people like, whereas like other HR disciplines, people have been doing it for 20 years. So
Mm.
right now, to find someone who's been working formally, not just doing stuff, but formally working
Hard.
with DNI for 20 years is difficult.
Yeah, yeah.
10 years, again, is difficult, because it was probably it was only in the last 10 years that companies really started having, inclusion, or,
Yeah.
diversity or equality roles properly. I think in a lot of the public sector, actually, they did have them um a bit more, but that's probably because they have stuff like in education around widening participation, and they're just a bit more
Mm.
accountable, right? But
Yeah.
in the private sector, it's really pressure from, I guess culturally what's going on at the moment that has made it happen.
When
So
the BLM marches were going on, I have not seen companies scramble like that in a long time. I saw people like I won't say their name, but I saw massive companies all of a sudden were saying, "Yeah, we're getting a D&I director," and it was like, really, like this is what it took. Like this is what it took for you to get that. It's crazy. You
yeah,
applied
I mean,
for it.
yeah, it's the pressure from society that makes, people like private companies anyway. That's what makes them do everything. Like, even if it comes to women, if it comes to social mobility, whatever it comes to, like disability, like if there's no pressure, very few companies, not all, because some companies are, I guess, quite I don't know what the word is, responsible, or I don't know what the word is, but they are. But a lot of companies, it will only be optics. Like, to be honest, I used to work at Deloitte when I had a decent experience there. I learned lots. It was a good, I guess, catapult for my career. But I was co-chair of the Multicultural Network, and they were really always against having a Black network. So that essentially the Multicultural Network was like the ethnic minority network. So all of the ethnic minorities like squeezed into one together. And obviously, if you've ever done anything in D&I, or even if you just have like general sense, you know that different populations within like different ethnic minorities, we face different challenges within the workplace. So sometimes lumping us all together is not helpful. And we'll talk about BAME another time. But yeah, so they were really against having a Black network, but then BLM happened and suddenly they created a Black network. And I remember being at home and just laughing and just being like, this is mad, because like people in your organization have been lobbying for this for a long time. And it's only now that it happens. But sometimes that's what needs to happen to, I guess, force companies' hands to do what people are asking for.
Yeah, no, agreed.
So I mean, I don't want to bait you out, but I'm baiting myself out at the same time. I've seen you in a couple Twitter spaces recently.
Yes, I've been in a couple spaces, getting navigating.
I don't even get spaces on my phone. Like, I don't have that, on our Everybody Hates HR Twitter. Follow us, guys, by the way. On our Everybody Hates HR Twitter, I can see there's a button there to look at all the spaces and stuff like that. And that was the first time I knew that there was that button, because on my personal Twitter, it doesn't exist. So the only time I see spaces is if somebody shares, hey, I'm having this space, and then I can join it. But I can't like search spaces or anything. So it's even a
Oh,
miracle that I found some of these spaces. And it means that obviously the only spaces that I go into are the ones that are like super bait because everybody's sharing them.
yeah. No, I've got the spaces button on my Twitter.
That's very rude. I don't know why they don't want to give it to me. But there was a couple of spaces recently where, I mean, we won't get into the specifics of it because that's somebody else's business. But there was one we were in recently where they were like, "Oh, I've emailed this guy's work," and it's like, we've emailed a couple of times, and they don't want to fire him. And I remember just laughing and being like, "What?" I'm thinking in my head, like, "What do people expect your employer to do?" Like, it depends what you're emailing them to say. Sometimes, if you've done something really wild online, your employer will fire you, but you need to have
There'll
actually
still
done
be a
it, and they need
process.
evidence.
Yeah, yeah. Because even with was it what are they called? Legal in General? Was it them?
Yeah,
Even with
the
no,
girl
or was
who's the girl who released the voice notes of her um
Yeah, I can't remember if it was them or Savills, but whoever it was, the company released a statement on Twitter saying, they were gonna do, they were looking into it, blah blah. And I remember people saying, oh, so they haven't fired this person yet. Oh, that's all they're saying. So what are they doing about it? And it's like, hello, confidentiality. They're not gonna come on social media and say, oh yeah, we've got rid of this person. Like you're never gonna know. You know what I mean? Unless you find that person's LinkedIn and you see from this date to this date and it doesn't say present anymore, like one. And then two, there's always going to be a process. Even if you send screenshots and stuff, like unless you want them to win and get a bag for the company not following
you
process,
know
they have to do it.
do you know what, I've just searched it while you were talking there. And this is the statement that Savills released. So this was the guy who had allegedly sent racist tweets to the footballers who missed the penalties, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think yeah. So anyway, this is what they wrote. After everyone was like, "What are you going to do? What are you going to do? What are you going to do?" So they wrote, Savills confirms that the staff member connected with the racist comments placed on Twitter claims that his account was taken over by a third party and that the matter is being referred to the Greater Manchester Police. Savills has acted swiftly and confirms that the individual is suspended from duty pending the findings of this investigation, which is being progressed as a priority. Savills has a policy of zero tolerance on any form of racial abuse or discrimination. And reading that, I, as a HR person, completely understand it. What you obviously can't do is just be like, oh yeah, I'm going to fire him because you don't have any evidence. Like, he has obviously put forward, I mean, you have the tweets, but he's obviously said, oh, somebody took over my account, which could be true. Obviously, it's highly unlikely that it's not true. But as an employer, you still have to go through due process, because if he now sues you for unfair dismissal and he says, well, I told you that someone took over and you didn't investigate it, you're finished and you'll lose. Even if there's a video of him, tweeting the tweets or whatever, you just need to go through the investigation and make sure you follow due process. But it's like people want to write to your employer and your employer to call him back and say, oh yeah, by the way, here's all the confidential information on the person that you barely know, like, we fired them, like, thank you for your report. It's never going to happen.
No, it's not. It's not. It's literally going to be processed. No one's ever going to be happy with a statement that a company releases because they want the details, but you're not going to get the details.
Yeah, the only time you will get the details is if the company confirms. Sometimes in the US, they love to confirm a dismissal because obviously their employment law is on the floor. But even in the UK, they might just say that they've parted ways. They won't tell you the specifics of it, especially if they signed like a settlement agreement or just anything. They're never going to tell you. They might just say, oh, we can confirm that the employee no longer works here. They won't say we fired them. They won't say the person resigned, unless the person, as we were speaking about earlier, unless the person steps down and is happy for them to share that, they won't share anything.
It's true. It's true. Yeah. Yeah. It's true. But
Speaking of
I
stepping
get
down,
the energy of like, making employers aware of who they potentially hired, but I
and I
mean,
also think in that particular space that was happening, the thing, obviously there were some allegations against a particular individual, and those allegations, they'll be hard for the employer to substantiate. So that's why it's difficult. With the Savills employee, he had tweeted something which was now in the public domain. Everyone could see that it originated from his account and blah, 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 right? So that was one thing. If you write to someone's employer and say, this person called me on the phone and shouted at me, for instance, the employer has no way to validate that happened. So they can do nothing. Even if they empathize with you, even if they believe you, in the absence of evidence that this incident has happened, like, they can't do anything. So you're more likely to, an employer is more likely to act on, oh, this person tweeted this or this person said this online, than this person did something to me, unless you have evidence and unless you've already taken it to the police and all this other kind of stuff.
yeah, it's true. It's true. But like I said, I get the energy that people give, but at the same time, don't waste your time, as mad as that sounds. Like, just knowing that it's not going to go anywhere without evidence, unless you have, like you said, unless you have that concrete evidence. You're literally just bothering somebody's manager.
Yeah, exactly. But I understand why people do it. I mean, I understand why people do it to a certain extent. I've seen complaints come in from people about social media, so about employees that were within organizations where I was like working in HR, and some of them are just ridiculous. They're just ridiculous. Like, oh, this person said this to me, it upset me. There was one. Somewhere I worked, there was a guy who worked in the company who had a podcast. Yeah, a football podcast. And let's say, I don't know, there's two rival teams. Let's say City and like Man City and Man United, right? So let's say he had a Man City podcast and he was telling a United fan that they're scum. And like football fans, they love to throw that scum word around. So he had called somebody else scum, and they said, oh, that's not very nice. And then he said something about the person's mum. Yeah, which obviously he thought was banter. This person then wrote in and said, this guy said this thing about my mum. What am I supposed to do with that? Do you get what I mean? Like, and the person never had the company written on their profile. Like, it's not like they were representing us, like, nothing.
You know what it is as well? Like, some people just feel better once they've sent stuff like that. Like, they feel like, okay, I've got it off my chest. I've potentially like messed with this person's head. I've potentially, got them in trouble at work. And it just makes people feel better.
I mean, I don't know about that. I feel like if obviously it depends on the gravity of what the person has done, and some of the things that people have been alleging on Twitter that other people have done, I understand why you would want to absolutely ruin their whole entire life. Like I get it, but it's more about how successful it's going to be, and I think that I understand what you mean. Like they don't want to feel like they're not doing anything, and so by I guess at least alerting the employer, you. I mean, you do something to be fair. Like it's not fair for me saying nothing happens,
There's a
even if you.
seed that's planted, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. You will definitely, though the person might not lose their job, you can impact their reputation. Because if, 5, 10 people are writing in saying very
Yeah.
bad things about you and what you've done and the allegations that you're making or whatever, for sure it will impact the view of whoever sees it. It might not even get to your people that you know, but at least the people who see it within the HR team or even maybe your line manager, it will probably eventually start to impact how they see you. So that is it's not fair for me to say that it doesn't have an impact if they don't get fired.
But then at that point, even if it does make a line manager, change how they view you and stuff, that especially depending on how long you've been at the company, essentially it would be up to the employee if it's too uncomfortable for them and then that makes them leave kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. But I don't think they just want the employee to leave. I think when people submit those kind of things, they want the employee to be fired because leaving doesn't give anybody any kind of satisfaction, does it? I guess
No.
they want sanctions to be taken against those people. And I think having seen, how people can be fired for what they say online or what they do, people think it's like the golden ticket. I'll tell their employer, oh, do you know that your employee does this when you're not around? But again, employers have to be fair to their employees. So
No, it's true. It's true. We move.
we're talking about stepping down, and this week there's been on a kind of similar theme. There's been lots of conversation around Tim Westwood. And then I think you were saying earlier that he stepped down and people were asking questions, but I didn't see the tweets. Like what were the tweets saying?
So he stepped down from Capital Extra, and people were saying, "Oh, why did he have to step down? Capital Extra, they knew about some of this stuff that was going on. So why did he have to step down? Like, why couldn't they just sack him?" And it's the same as what we were saying before. Even if there's more evidence for, and there probably definitely is for Westwood, there still has to be a process done if they were going to sack him, which is way longer than just kind of having an informal chat with him to say, like, this is what's going on, especially because his own company, as in that he was working for, the BBC, were the ones that have made this documentary and stuff, to say, like, it's probably better if we just part ways. And it's crazy because I don't know how it works in terms of if he was contracting or if he was an actual employee. But if he was, then he's probably been paid notice and holiday and all of these things and just gone about his merry way at his big retirement age that he is already anyway. Yeah.
Mate, for the record, Tim Westwood makes me sick, like literally to my stomach. I think he's a despicable human being and he's just gross. Like
He's a creep.
he's so creepy. Oh, he's just so creepy. So I'm glad that like there's some light being shed on some of the stuff that, had been happening literally over the last 30 years? Over the
It's
last
true,
30 years.
but Lola, do you know what I find really crazy? Not to like digress too much. I find it mad that, like, especially us Black people, we all knew what was going on, and then
Everybody.
there's a documentary that the BBC Three have put out. One is on BBC Three and not BBC One, but that's another story. And then also it's like nobody's talking about it anymore. It's literally it's come out, it's happened. There was a space, and that's it. Like
Yeah, but
the
he was even in the space. Like I think it's because of the particular victims that we're talking about here, or the particular people that were making the complaints. Like
yeah, it's
it's
horrible.
how many times has it been on Twitter? Like Black women coming together to be like, Tim Westwood
All
is
the time.
a creep. This is what he's done. It's not news.
That's why it's sad that it's not being spoken about with the same vim that you know, it should be. Like even the whole Johnny Depp stuff with his ex-wife, like I've seen more of that consistently than I have about this.
Mm.
So yeah, that's just messed up.
Yeah, but I when it comes to like people stepping down, I definitely understand why. And also companies, someone like, the BBC, who they've been paying him for a long time, by the way. So I don't know why they're
A
acting like,
long time.
yeah. From the BBC, they just at this point when it gets like the BBC has no loyalty to anybody. A lot of these like companies don't. So as soon as it gets hot, like what they want to do is disassociate themselves. They're
Yeah.
less interested, in my opinion anyway, about justice or taking sanctions or whatever. They just want to. We need to separate our brand from your brand right now. So the faster you can get out, the better. We can go through a long investigation. We can do X, Y, and Z. That's going to take this amount of time, or you can step down and we can issue the statement to say we're parting ways and we're no longer associated. And that's just what a lot of businesses will do. So I'm not surprised at all. And I'm also like, because he hasn't been fired and now they're not going to have to, well, I don't know what they're doing. Maybe they're still doing an investigation, but because he hasn't been fired, I'm sure he'll just pop up somewhere else again.
Yeah, 100%. Even if it's not in the UK, like he'll do the Ibiza rounds, he'll do, Europe and all of that.
I would love to know, yeah, like how Tim Westwood, like, I mean, I say I would love to know. I don't want anybody to spend any time or effort or money finding out, but in terms of how did he manage to infiltrate the spaces that he has, I mean, not Twitter spaces, the actual like spaces from a music like industry perspective that he has, who, like, I'm not about gatekeeping the culture all the time, but for stuff like that we need to gatekeep the culture, like bloody close those gates now, because he has been given so much access to people, to the culture, to everything, and he's like embedded himself and he's been given like the same privileges as, I don't know, like all like the way all of these celebrities do. And he's not even, would I even class him as a celebrity? Do you know what I mean? Like it's just crazy.
I would class him as a celebrity because I mean, he's been around so long. Like the videos,
He is, but yeah,
yeah,
I won't give
like
him credit.
people, like he was rubbing shoulders with like Big and Jay-Z, like when we
That's the
were,
thing that's the thing that gets me, because he's been given the kind of access that, like, you know, people who have been doing also. I'm not saying he hasn't done the work. He's obviously done the work. He's been working too hard, because the things that he shouldn't have been doing, he was doing. But
yeah.
people
I
don't.
just think it's the time. I feel like when you come around in certain times, it makes it easier to like get into certain spaces because there's not that many people doing what you're doing, how you're doing it.
Mm,
So I think that's why, and us, it's controversial, but us black people, we don't gatekeep as much as we should. So it makes it easier for people to, come into certain spaces and make their mark essentially, because literally been around since before we were born.
he's literally 64 years old.
That
And
is a
what
big
business
man.
do you have? Like, this is not even, it's nothing to do with ageism. I'm talking about from a romantic sense. What business do you have as a 64-year-old man checking for women's very young women who are at university? You're
We
still doing the rounds as a 64-year-old man trying to sleep with 18, 19-year-olds. Like, there's that, you have all this experience and all of this money and all of this, the power balance is never going to sit correctly. And I don't understand why, as a 64-year-old man, you are still checking for university students. It is disgusting.
it's foul. It's nasty. Is what
It's,
it
yeah,
is. Yeah.
it's gross. It's gross. But yeah, this is hopefully it doesn't just die down, and yeah, we like there is some outcome of the investigation. I don't even know what exact investigation is happening at the moment, but I'm sure he'll just fade into the background.
I think so. I think now so.
Okay. Onto a slightly lighter subject. Um, I sent you this article about how HR need to prepare for the metaverse, and like when I read it, it just spun me. So basically, there was this article, and it was basically talking about, the metaverse is coming. Some companies have already started, like, having meetings in like virtual reality spaces, and using avatars instead of just doing ordinary like Teams or Zoom calls or whatever. And they're talking about how is this going to affect HR? What kind of stuff are we going to see? And there was an example of a man and a woman who were in this virtual space. Let's just call it the metaverse, right? And they were colleagues. And the man, I think he had touched the woman's bum. So his avatar had grabbed her avatar's bum. I think that's what it was. And then she had basically said it was sexual harassment. And I was just thinking, I had to stew on it. I was like, okay, is that sexual harassment? And I got to the place that it is sexual harassment, and then it really scared me of what the hell is going to happen in these virtual spaces, and how are we going to be able to police it, and are we even going to be expected to police what's happening in these virtual spaces?
Yeah, I agree with you, because even if you think about it, if you're playing a game console with somebody, like I remember being younger and playing it with my brother, and even though we're watching the screen, I'll still be pushing him and he'll be pushing me, because
Mm,
you're playing the game, so you're getting into it. So I feel like it's the same thing. Like even though the person isn't physically in front of you, you know what you're doing. Like you're pressing certain buttons, controllers, or keyboard, whatever it is, to create that action. So
mm.
it's very tapped.
Yeah, it's crazy because, like, when it comes to harassment, obviously it's not all physical. So even if you're in a meeting, for me, it's the equivalent of being in a meeting or being on a call with your colleague and saying, "Hey, in my mind right now, I'm touching your bum." And if you said that, that would be sexual harassment. So for me,
Mm,
the idea of being in a space where you have, made your avatar touch somebody else's avatar's bum, thereby indicating to them that you want to touch them, like that is tap behavior. It's crazy. And
yeah,
yeah, I'm actually worried about the kind of things that will happen in these spaces. Like, yeah, and no, I'm not ready for it. It's very, it all feels very unnecessary to me.
it is. It is. I just feel I get it, because I feel like there's loads of things that have happened where people are like, oh, this doesn't make sense. Or I remember when I first got Twitter, I was like, what do I need this for? Like, do you know what I mean? And obviously now I love Twitter. So I feel like eventually I'll probably come round, but at the moment it just feels like Sims is what it feels like.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
that's what I mean. That's what's scary about it, because I love Sims, by the way, and you can it, it may make people a bit distant from their actions, because in real life there's certain things that you wouldn't say and wouldn't do, but then when you're behind a screen and it feels like you're playing a game or something like that, you might forget yourself for a second, you know. So
Mm.
I feel like there's going to be a whole host of stuff there, and there was, apart from that kind of stuff, there was, obviously some people are already feeling isolated at work, and there's stuff from a HR perspective that you need to do around, employees feeling isolated, or even employees that have issues with addiction. Like, can you get addicted to the metaverse, and what safeguards do employers need to put in place to make sure that that doesn't happen? So there's just so many things to think about, and I guess we'll have to just see like how it unfolds. I told you, I asked my friend's boyfriend, like we were all hanging out, my boyfriend, my friend and her boyfriend, and I asked the question, I was like, is it cheating if it happens in the metaverse? And I there were varying answers, and then we all ultimately arrived at yes, it's still cheating if you do it in the metaverse. So on that basis, I think what do you think, Velisa? Is it cheating if it happens in the metaverse? If you kiss somebody else's avatar?
I think, do you know what? I think it's cheating, but I guess it's easier to forgive,
I
you
don't know
know.
if it is, to
But
be
then,
honest.
but then, in the metaverse, like if you can chat, like was there talking and texting before you kissed that other
I don't
person?
know. No, we was actually talking about having sex in the metaverse.
No, that's cheating. That's cheating.
Yeah, yeah, no, I think so too. I think so too. No, it has to be. I'm literally thinking about it like Sims now, like my sim and your sim. No, that's wild. That's wild. That's a sackable offense.
Yeah, it's true. It's true because what is the difference between sexting and the metaverse?
No, exactly. There's none. There's none. But some of the demons will come out and say that it's different.
No, it's not. Because remember, do you watch Black Mirror?
Yes, but I don't know which one are you talking about?
So there was, I think it was the last one. There was
I
a
haven't
Black
seen it yet.
Mirror. There was a Black Mirror season where basically there was a guy. Sorry, there was a guy who was playing a video game, and in the video game he would turn into a certain character, and he was playing it with like his best friend, and they would like get into this game and like have sex and stuff, and they could feel it, like, so it was stimulating,
Oh
so they
my
could feel what
God.
was going on, but only within the game. And then like they would both go home to like their wives and stuff and act like nothing happened.
But were they having sex with each other?
Yeah, in the game, but it was stimulating, so you would see them react to it.
No, that's really wild. That's really
Yeah.
wild. But
So
that's why
imagine if the metaverse is like that.
no, but that's why with Black Mirror, just in general, I love Black Mirror, but like sometimes it freaks me out a little bit because I can see how just a few steps in the wrong direction, and a lot of these things can happen. A lot of them, like yeah, they're
It's
just
true. It's true.
it's too close to home.
It's
Some of the
true.
stuff that happens in Black
It's
Mirror.
true. I also think though, like, you know, from a HR standpoint, just managing something like people as avatars will just drive me up the wall. Like, can you just imagine there's like a virtual Christmas party?
That's just gonna be just wild.
It will be madness. Like, how do you then deal with that in a disciplinary? Like, it's going to be so crazy.
And there was stuff like they were talking about around privacy as well. So like what people are doing do people get privacy in the metaverse, or can you can you pull up what they've been doing? Do you know what I mean? So if they
That's
jump into
true.
the virtual cupboard to have you know a virtual um knocking of the boots, will you
That's
see it?
true.
Do you get to
That's
like do you
true.
have overarching? I'm sure like in workspaces there'll be some IT policy which says
Yeah,
we
there must
monitor
be like
everything in the
some,
metaverse, blah blah blah.
yeah, some activity. But then what happens? You say, oh, my avatar drank too much, and like, I just don't
No,
understand.
that's crazy. Or like, imagine having a disciplinary where you're all avatars. I wouldn't be able to take that seriously.
Oh, that would be so fun though.
No, but it wouldn't because
It would. That would
with the
be
avatar.
so fun. I'd
No,
like
I just
shuffle
wouldn't
my
be able to take it
papers
seriously.
virtually.
No, and will the avatars cry? Like, sometimes people cry and stuff like that. If I have to look at someone's avatar crying, I just won't be able to take it seriously.
It's so funny. Like, I think that would be quite fun. I'd be interested to see that.
I wouldn't. I'm generally quite embracing of change and tech and stuff like that. But this is the one where I'm like, from a personal perspective, I'm very interested. Um, I just want to see like from human psychology perspective, like once, we start to move more in that direction, like how people behave and the impact that it has on society and whatnot. But from a work
Mhm.
perspective, I'm super uninterested. Like I don't want to overcomplicate things further. It's just, and there will I know already, I know how people are. There will be specific disputes about things that people have done in the
Mhm.
metaverse.
No, it's true. It's true. It will be so strange. But I'm looking forward to it and not at the same time because it would just be weird. But yeah. So, Lola, have you got any dilemmas for us this week?
Yes, I have. We had a dilemma come in on Instagram, so thank you for submitting that. It's a little bit long, so I'm just going to distill it into the key points, and then we can talk about like, I mean, I've got some views, but keen to get your views as well. Maybe we have a bit of a discussion about it. So we had the dilemma come in, and it basically said it relates to 2020 during COVID. So as you know, during COVID, loads of people unfortunately lost their jobs. There was lots of redundancies and stuff that happened. So this person was put at risk of redundancy. They were ultimately made redundant, even though they feel the the selection criteria that was applied. So basically, how they assessed all the people that were going to be made redundant wasn't fair, and he maybe shouldn't have been made redundant. When he was made redundant, they told him that he would get 6 months pay, and they sent him a settlement agreement to sign. They had already signed it, so the employer signed it, and then he countersigned it and sent it back. So now he's got a copy of the settlement agreement, which is signed by his employer and signed by him. Before the payment was made, but after the settlement agreement was signed, the employer realized they made a mistake, and he should have only had 2 months pay as part of his redundancy package. So they paid him 2 months pay, even though they sent him something that was signed and it said 6 months. He just let it go at the time and said, like, obviously a lot of these processes are very stressful, and he let it go, but he since has felt very aggrieved by it. And he's basically saying, should he have had the full money? Should he have had the 6 months? What are the rules around selection criteria, and is it too late to do anything about it now? So there's lots to unpack there. Where do you want to start? Should we start with the timing? That's probably the easiest one.
Yeah, because it was 2020, right? And he's asking, or she is asking, if if they can do something in 2022.
Yeah.
I feel like for what it is a very big gap to want to go back to it.
Mm.
I feel like at the time where the person felt like, oh, this is a stressful process, that's probably why it happened, I'll let it go. I feel like that's the time to be like, you sent me something for 6 months and I signed it and you signed it, which is, legally binding. That's what you need to give me. I feel like trying to go back to it now it's difficult, isn't it?
Yeah. So there are some statutory timelines that are involved. Generally, if you want to bring a claim against your employer, it is um 3 months from the date whatever the incident happened. For redundancy, specifically for statutory redundancy pay, if it's statutory redundancy pay, you can claim up to 6 months after. But where we're
Yeah.
talking about like a clear 2 years, it's going to be very difficult to bring anything in an employment, well, actually impossible to bring anything in an employment tribunal. What you could do, and I'm not a legal expert, but the other option is to bring it outside of an employment tribunal, because you can still bring civil claims. So in theory, and a lawyer would be able to better advise, you could basically say, we have a contract, you were supposed to pay me this amount of money, you never paid it to me actually. And so like under contract law, you've breached the contract you had with me, so you may be able to take something through the civil claims court on the basis that they owe you money, not unfair dismissal or something like that. They just owe you money because they said they was going to pay you a certain amount. They didn't. So now, in theory, you can bring a small claim or something against your employer. And I think the limits for that are much longer, so they can be like years. But that is not like, that wouldn't come under like a HR matter. That would be a civil matter. So that for me is the only way I can think that you may be able to get that money back now, because if you try to go through some sort of employment tribunal, then they're just going to say you're out of time.
And it also, I think it will depend on any correspondence that you had after they had sent the severance and that person had sent it back. Like, if there was like a thank you or just anything that implies that, you were okay with it and
Yeah.
you've checked it. Do you know what I mean? All of that stuff, especially if for example, you would go down the civil route, stuff like that would come into like to the forefront.
Yeah.
So I think
And
to look at correspondences would be
yeah,
helpful.
any correspondence that actually that happens after you signed it, because for instance, if after you signed it, you need, like, they did say that I think they wrote to say, or they realized that they had made a mistake. So if they wrote and said, oh, this is what we're going to do, and you basically said, oh, all right
No
then
problem. Yeah.
yeah, that's the problem. But if they
Yeah.
wrote and said, this is what we're going to do, you said, no, I want my 6 months, then actually, again, more of a claim. But for sure, an employment tribunal is not going to hear any of this now at all.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a shame, but yeah. This is why when you do, you do get things like that. I don't, obviously it was 2020, so there's a lot going on, but
so much, yeah.
it's good not to sit on things like that and just, get it sorted in, because even if it wasn't the 6 months, for their mistake as goodwill, you still might have got a bit more or something like that, depending on, the HR and company and legal people involved. But yeah, lesson learned, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And the whole thing when it comes to like tribunal, when it comes to settlement, it costs employers money a lot of the time, whether it's in time or whether it's in legal fees to go to tribunal. So
Yeah, they don't like to do it.
Yeah, they don't. And obviously there's potential reputational damage and stuff. So that's their incentive not to go to tribunal or not to long things out. But also from an employee perspective, there's an incentive because it's just always going to be so draining. And sometimes employers rely on the fact that people are just exhausted, especially in a year like 2020. I can't say that I would have been willing to pursue it either, because you're already so drained, and depending on when it was, you could have had like, generally dealing with COVID, all of the stuff around BLM, just generally not knowing what the hell is happening in the world. Sometimes employers can rely on the fact that you just can't be bothered or you're too tired to take it forward, but time is of the essence. So I would, like, for anyone listening, if something is going on now and you're thinking, should you raise it, should you not, you should always have that magic 3 months in your head. So 3 months from the date of the incident, not 3 months when you leave or whatever. It's really 3 months from when the issue, whatever the issue is, happened. So even if you're still employed and something happened a year ago, unless it's ongoing, you might not be able to do anything. So, always, keep that in mind. The other thing was in terms of the selection criteria, and there wasn't a lot of information given around, what the selection criteria was and to be able to determine whether it was fair. But what happens when you go through a redundancy process is, let's say there used to be two, I don't know, HR advisors, and now the company is only going to have one for whatever reason. They would need to assess which of these two HR advisors is the one that should be moving forward. Sometimes if you don't have enough length of service, they just get rid of you and they keep the one that has more length of service. But if both people have the over 2 years service, or if they want to include both people in the selection pool, then they would need to apply some sort of criteria, and it would be based on what you need to do the job. So they might use the criteria of, okay, your last performance review, how good you are at employee relations, your stakeholder management. One of the criteria may be how long you've been in the business, the feedback that you've had. Whatever the criteria is, whether you have your CIPD accreditation or something like that, and then they need to score both people against that criteria. So I guess in this case, the person who sent us their dilemma is saying either the criteria they used was not fair, or they don't think they got good scores or fair scores against that criteria. And so without knowing what the criteria is, it's really difficult to say. But what I would say to anybody who's going through something like that is you can always ask to see the criteria, and you can ask how you scored against the criteria. They're never going to tell you exactly what somebody else's scores are, because that's confidential and none of your business, but they will tell you like where you came in the order. So if you scored the lowest, they'll tell you scored the lowest, and that's why you're no longer going to be in the role. So yeah, always ask for the criteria. And you can also, if you go through a proper consultation, which you should do if you're going through a redundancy process, you can also ask for that criteria to be amended. You can say, oh, I think this is important. They might not take that on board because they might disagree, but they may also say, okay, yeah, we can add that in, and that might work in your favor or something like that. So yeah, I mean, I hope that was helpful to the person who sent the dilemma in. Unfortunately, it probably is too late for you to go down the tribunal route, but definitely try another way. Small claims court does incur fees, so just speak to a lawyer about it, and they'll be able to tell you if they think it's worth your time or not.
Yeah, agreed again. Lola, you're giving all the energy.
And literally, I can't lie to you. I'm not on my sofa and I'm laying down and I feel very good about it. I'm so sad now because we're at the end, and usually Foye does the bit at the end, and she tells everybody where to find stuff.
Now it's the baton has passed to you this week.
Me, the baton has passed to you. Oh no, you have your.
I do my part. Thank you.
I mean, I could never replace Foye, so all I'm going to say is thank you guys for listening, and all of the information will be in the description below.
That's a wrap. Hey.
I was about to say you can do your part, but you're ahead of me.
I'm on point now. I know when it comes in.
Yeah, well done, well done. Thank you guys for listening.
Thank you. Bye. 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 Bye.